Welcome to this edition of When the Biomass Hits the Wind Turbine, a discussion of sustainable living and what that means to you and me. I'm Jay Warmke.
And this morning, I'm Annie Warmke.
Okay, how about this afternoon? Will you
I'm
still
not
be?
sure.
All right, well, at this moment, we're going to speak about the risks associated with fire and solar electricity.
You mean when they're paired together?
Yeah, when you have solar, or the alternative is we were kicking this around like burn baby burn, or
No, I didn't say that.
It's shocking, these things.
Yeah, fire
actually
is shocking.
Yeah, all right, whatever. Anyway, so this what prompted this discussion is apparently last year Amazon has solar installed on most of their facilities here in the United States, or a good number of them. And they had a surprisingly large number of fairly spectacular fires associated with these solar installations. So they actually shut down all of their solar installations worldwide and did an assessment of what was going on. And
they're a lot more worried about that than their employees. Then,
yeah, well, they were all on bathroom break and saw the building was on fire. So anyway, so they're, that was something that really didn't make the media, at least to my attention, and a lot of the people on our solar calls that we do. And it was surprising. So I wanted to look into it, and I wanted to see just what are the realistic risks associated with fire and solar panels. So, you think about solar panels, at least I do, they're made of silicon, which is basically sand. And
don't think about them catching on fire.
Yeah, it's like saying, what's the association of windows? And, because it's basically
glass. Yes.
So, there is, it's not surprising that fire could be an issue. I mean, as we get more and more installations out there, currently, by the end of 2020, there were about 2.7 million homes in the United States that have solar. So you would assume some of them would catch on fire.
Well, and just to back up for a minute, is that I'm trying to think about, okay, electricity can cause fire. That's why you don't want to have a mouse or a rat in your house, because they love to chew on those wires and burn things. But I'm just wondering what does catch on fire when there's a problem with the solar array?
Yeah, well, there are a number of things that can catch on fire. It's not just glass, and it's not just aluminum. Now, those two you wouldn't think would catch on fire, but there's about 10% of the solar panel itself is what they refer to as polymers, which are plastics. Yeah. And they do catch on fire.
Yeah,
in fact,
and they like to melt.
Yeah, they do quite a lot. And of course,
but
the
wait,
insulation.
what is the part of that? Where is that located? Because I can't picture it.
It's integrated, in some of the things, but also you think about the little connection box on the back. That's made of plastic.
Is the inverter plastic?
Well, but that's not on the panel typically. They're usually metal. But there are wires, and the wires have insulation, so that insulation will burn. There are sealants, they seal them against moisture. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So those sealants can catch on fire. So, but between 5 to 10% of the content of a solar panel is going to be burnable, essentially. So they catch on fire. Well, you got electricity, you've got a fuel source, and at some point,
probably plenty of air.
I mean, that's what you need, right? Oxygen, a fuel source, and
some fire,
some sort of fuel. Yeah. So, well, where fire came, at least to my awareness around solar, was in 2014. The National Electrical Code started implementing what they call rapid shutdown. And this was something that was designed to help protect firefighters,
like first responders of any kind, really.
Right. So a house is on fire. Mm-hmm. There's a solar array up on the roof. Well, the first thing they normally do is they come rushing in, they go to the electric meter, and they pull the meter. That's like a big off switch to the house. So they've now disconnected electricity from the home. So they make the assumption, okay, there's now no electric power in this building.
That's going to shock them and kill them.
Right. But if you've got solar on the building, well, the solar itself is going to stop producing, but the wires that run from the solar panel to the inverter are still going to be live if the sun is shining. And that
Well,
can
in
be a
some
lot of,
cases, even when it isn't. I
well,
mean,
there are some other risks associated,
yeah.
but basically now a firefighter climbs up on the roof. He takes out his chainsaw. He wants to cut a hole in the roof to vent the smoke out of the building, and he cuts through an electric line, and
And
it has
whoop,
600 volts of
he's
electricity on it.
toast too.
Yeah, so they said, "All right, guys, this is a dangerous situation. So when we turn off the main disconnect, which has to be located next to the meter."
Meaning that you're disconnecting. When you say disconnect, you're just disconnecting the. No, but you're
Okay.
saying disconnect, so you've got lots of jargon in
Yeah,
here.
no, well, if I'm disconnecting, I am disconnecting.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
that's how that works.
Oh, you're so
So
serious.
I know. So it has to be located next to or near the meter. So that when they come in with the pull the meter, there's a little sticker on the meter that says, "Hey, there's a solar array here." And they look around, it's got to be located within 10 feet of that meter and
What does?
the
Oh,
disconnect.
the
And so
disconnect.
then they
Okay.
go, "Okay, there's the disconnect. Okay, right there it is. Turn that off." Now, what the NEC said is when you turn that off, we want the power to stop flowing from the array. So that's basically what rapid shutdown means. So over the years, this has evolved a little bit, but what we're finding now is there are now electronic devices attached to pretty much every single solar panel that's installed on a building where somebody might occupy it, and it shuts off the power at the solar panel. So the NEC assumes a firefighter will look at a solar panel and say, "Hey, that might be hot. I'm not going to cut through it." But anything
Yeah, but
outside
I
of
don't
it,
think they're trained
fair.
around
Well, there are
solar
some training,
energy.
but there's not that much. And there really, the extent of the problem has not, it's just beginning.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a bigger and
Yeah.
bigger problem. So we have to get more and more education out there.
Right. Well,
Um,
one thing I will say, we have trained some firefighters, and it's clear that they really don't know enough. And we're hoping, that that the U.S. Firefighter Association, whatever it is, any first responder will do some training with people, so we don't see people risking their lives and dying from that's just silly if they're not educated.
Yeah, they haven't been too good at monitoring just how many fires in the United States are associated with solar. They really haven't been tracking that data. I have some numbers that say that between 2015 and 2018, there were about 155 fires.
Well,
So
that
that's
seems
not
like
very many.
well, that seems like a lot to me on something that seems so.
Not when you've got a
Well, I
million
know
of
that,
these
but if
things.
they're installed properly, they shouldn't have
Well,
anything.
you could say that about any home. It should never catch on fire if everything is installed properly. Things happen. Sometimes it has nothing to do with the installation.
Oh,
It might be a lightning strike, it might be a
right.
squirrel chewing through the
Oh,
wire
well,
and
that's a big
shorting
problem
itself out.
too. Yeah.
So there are reasons things happen. I mean, things just happen. But there was a very comprehensive German study. Leave it to the Germans to to go ahead and find out this information for us. So they did a study in 2018, and at the time there were 1.7 million installations in Germany. Okay, so to just show the difference, but it's quite a lot. It's a fair number, and they estimated that 430 homes associated with that 1.7 million had fires.
Wow.
Okay, but of that 430, only 210 were associated with the solar array.
Right, but
So,
that's half.
yeah, but the majority caught fire for some other reason, had nothing to do with the solar array. So out of that 210, then they really kind of drilled down as to what caused these things to catch on fire. So you got any guesses? I'm gonna let's play
Well,
20
squirrels,
questions.
because I know that if they don't install squirrel guards on arrays, squirrels are really bad. They love electricity and they like to get in there and have a house. Um, what? Oh, I think another thing, a bad installation, of course, faulty equipment, um, the house catching on fire by itself and the ray is right there and can't avoid it.
Well, that was about half of them. So,
Yeah.
all right. You're on the right track. So the leading cause was poor installation.
Okay.
So poor installation was about 39% of all of
That's
these fires.
terrible.
Yeah, and somebody just, I mean, they messed it up. They left wires loose. They
Right. Well, a
didn't.
lot of people aren't really trained. They don't know why they do what they do. And
Mhm.
so then they install improperly or they're lazy.
Yeah, or yeah, they just make a mistake. You get tired. A lot of these installation companies, they want to work these people to
Oh,
death.
I
So
know
you
it.
start at 6 in the morning, you finish when it's getting dark at 11 o'clock
And
at
they're
night,
carrying panels on the roof all day long. I
and
don't
they
know.
just forget
That's
to hook something
silly.
up or
Yeah.
they do something.
Nobody inspects.
Yeah, well,
That's the real issue there is that the people are working people too hard and then they don't inspect.
yeah. So anyway, the second leading cause was product flaws.
Okay.
Just
I said that.
yes, you did.
Faulty equipment.
Faulty equipment. So that was about 36%
Wow.
of all of the installations. So you get something, a panel that's bad and shorts out,
The
or most of
wiring.
it, inverters were the number one
Mm-hmm.
product that caused problems. 18% was bad design. So the person who actually
Oh.
designed the system may have put in too small a wire,
Yeah.
for example, or they may have specified an indoor rated component when
Yeah.
they're putting it outdoors.
So again, not enough training on the why you do what you do.
Sure. Well, and another thing that was fairly common that I saw referenced a lot was on some of these larger commercial buildings, you can install an inverter up on the roof.
Uh-huh.
It's going to be like a flat roof.
Right.
Well, these flat roofs often puddle up water,
Right.
and they've designed the components like even an inverter that's sitting in water. And so
So
water
that's bad
just
design.
yeah, so it
More bad design.
well, sometimes it would be bad design, but sometimes, when you design it, you think you're all right, but then leaves gather in the drain and it
Yeah, but that's still
puddles
bad
up.
design,
It
Jay, because
is.
you're a moron if you're not thinking that, oh, leaves happen.
Yeah,
Roofs can flood if they're
things
flat.
happen. Well, and
Yeah.
snow. Snow is
Well,
another
that's
issue.
right. I would bet that's the biggest thing.
Uh-huh. Or you get, for example, down in Florida, you may just get an unimagined amount of rain in
That's
a
what I'm
very
saying.
short
And then it
period of
floods the
time.
roof, but
Yeah.
these are things you should know if you're the designer.
Well, or take into account anyway.
Yes.
And the fourth item was external. 10% of all the
A house
fires.
catching on fire.
No, lightning strike,
Oh, lightning strike, hurricane.
squirrels.
Uh-huh.
Squirrels and lightning seem to be the two
Yeah.
biggies. You know.
Well, there's squirrels pretty much everywhere, and they're very happy to live under an array and chew on it.
Yes, they love that kind of thing. So those were the
The
main.
other thing you didn't mention, though, is that I don't think in this industry there are very many people periodically checking things out. They might go around and say, "Hey, do we have a board loose in the spring or a piece of aluminum, not aluminum, but that plastic siding needs to be replaced." But they don't look at their array, and things happen. Wires are exposed to sun and they wear out or whatever, and they're not talking about that, but that definitely could be an issue.
Right. Well, there you're talking about operation and maintenance and how well are these things maintained on a consistent basis.
Right.
You should be doing physical inspections of this stuff at least once a
Right.
year,
Right.
because yeah, things wear, things fall apart. Maybe a zip tie comes loose and then it's rubbing
Yeah,
against
it gets
something.
blown around. Or a squirrel makes one little bite and then over time there's a problem.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me interrupt here for just a second to remind everybody that you are listening to When the Biomass Hits the Wind Turbine with Jay and, at least for the morning, Annie Warmke, reminding you it is indeed the end of the world as we know it.
And today I say thank God.
Thank God. Well, it's the end of our utility grid as we know it,
Oh
because
yeah, that's a good thing.
things are a changing.
Adios, fossil. I started to say
Fossil.
coal and fossil fuel others.
Me fossil is say Sue fossil, right?
Oh man, that was sad.
I know. Anyway, so you were talking about operation and maintenance, and actually, I was just listening to another podcast, in fact, where they were talking about how there's a company that's doing a drone or an air
Oh, yeah,
inspection
I thought that was
of
cool. Uh-huh.
all of the arrays that are over 1 megawatts, and 1 megawatt
So
is pretty big.
I was gonna ask you, but is that a commercial then? Would be
Yeah, pretty
commercial
much
grade?
commercial. They're
Okay.
not going after residential. That would just be too much.
Uh-huh.
But they're doing these flyover inspections using
Mhm.
drones and manned aircraft. And one of the things they're able to do is identify where are their hotspots. You know, if there's a problem, often it shows up in a thermal imaging
Oh, okay.
as a
Uh-huh.
hotspot. So you could see, is there arcing going on for sure?
What's
Arcing
wait, what's
arcing is a
arcing?
cause. Yeah, that's a big cause of these fires. It happens, well, you've all seen it, where if you take two wires and you separate them a little bit and the electricity
Well,
jumps
static
between the wires.
electricity in the winter,
Yeah,
that's
static
arcing.
is an arc. But you start getting that little thing going on,
Mhm.
and that can cause a fire. And DC is much more prone to
DC
arcing.
electricity.
DC, direct current,
Right.
is much more prone to arcing than AC electricity, which we use. And it has something to do with the
Well, AC is
waveforms.
more in the house.
Well, but AC, the waveform, it goes back and forth and goes above 0 volts and below
That might
zero.
be TMI.
Well, I know, but it's self-correcting.
Self-correcting.
If you've got this thing arcing, it's gonna
Oh,
flutter
it
to the point, and
tries to fix it
it
by
turns
its
itself off
uh-huh.
essentially. But DC doesn't do that. So the DC side can arc, and if it does arc like that, it's like an arc welder.
At
You
some
can
point it
literally,
could catch on fire or it
for
could
sure.
poop itself out.
Yeah, but what I was getting to with the whole drone thing is that this will begin to create a database of, it adds to the transparency of the inventory of solar. So investors will look at this and say, this installation doesn't have problems or has a history of not having problems. It appears to be well maintained. It appears to be well installed. And when they start making investment decisions with that information in mind, then the people installing them are going to put more energy and effort into making sure that the quality is there because they get a better return. Right now, there's often an incentive to just go in, get it done, turn it on. Yeah, it works. Now let's get out of here.
Mhm.
And that may be part of the problem with Amazon. They went out and hired low
Any
bidders.
old body.
Yeah, and they're doing contractors who don't have really a loyalty there, and they probably set unrealistic schedules.
Oh
And
yeah, like do it yesterday.
yeah, get it done, get out of here. There was no accountability after you leave. Amazon was an early adopter, so people are learning. So maybe some of these systems were installed before that learning curve
Well, and
was
again, I'm saying this over and over, but a lot of installers don't know why they do what they do. And I know from talking to people on the phone that there are many people who are going into the installation business because there's a lot of money coming from the government for this kind of work, but they're just grabbing anybody off the street to do the install and they don't know the basics of why they do what they do.
right. Yeah, I always say that if when they hold a mirror to their mouth, if it fogs,
That's right.
you're
And they
hired.
can climb a ladder.
And if you show up the second day, you still have a job. And if you show up the third day, you still have a job. But if you don't show up the fourth day, then let's get someone else who can fog up the mirror. And that's a mindset that has to go away. I mean, it has to go away if this is going to be a professional, successful industry.
Well, it has to go away for a lot of reasons. You know, when people use their body to make a living, they should have some respect for that contribution. But I am hopeful, and this isn't exactly about fires, but I'm hopeful because I know that under the new infrastructure bill, there are some incentives to installing companies around uh, paying a living wage and also using American made
Yeah,
products.
what you're talking about there is the Inflation Reduction Act, which
Reduction.
which was just recently passed, and it does build in incentives and pretty significant incentives that these systems must be installed paying prevailing wage, which is basically paying union wages, whether you're working with a union or not. And And so these people are going to be making significant amounts of money, when they're being paid 25, $30 an hour as an installer there. And then they also incentivize the use of American made products, which the hope there is that's going to um, help recreate the solar manufacturing industry, because we've in the United States, because we've seen a lot of disruptions with supply chain.
Yeah.
We've also seen solar panels that are made essentially with slave labor in the Uyghur district in China. So
Hmm.
there's a law that had to be passed here in the US that says if you buy anything from that region, you have to demonstrate that nowhere along its supply line was slave labor used.
Children.
Otherwise, they'll confiscate the panels, they'll confiscate the
Yeah. Well,
material
we
when
don't
it
know
comes
how
in.
much effort they're putting into doing that, but it's the idea of it that's very good.
Well, and there was another thing that disrupted supply chain, which was that, during the Trump administration, they passed some tariffs that said, listen, if you're installing or if you're importing solar panels from China, you've got to pay a tariff on these panels, like 25%. Um, well, what China did is essentially moved their manufacturing plants to other countries. They moved them into
Like the
Thailand,
Philippines.
Vietnam,
Yeah.
Cambodia,
Uh-huh.
and Malaysia. Those were the
Hmm.
four main countries that these things were moved to. And then somebody, a US manufacturer, said, you know what? I think they did that just to avoid the tariffs. Which to me
Duh.
is like, yeah, Captain Obvious.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody knows. But 80% of the panels were coming from those four countries now.
Hmm.
And when the Commerce Department started investigating it, the law says, if China is found guilty of this, then there will be up to like a 200% penalty on the cost of the panels. And that gets paid by the person who bought them. So these solar installers are going, really? Okay, I just paid $1 million for some solar panels, but you're saying that in a couple of months I have to pay 2 million in fines because I bought these because you guys
But
were
this
were
is what
messing
we
with the
have to
orders.
do to smack people around and say, look,
Well,
the lower cost is not always a lower
yeah, but
cost.
the unintended consequence, or perhaps the intended consequence, everybody canceled their orders from those four countries. Zero. I mean,
Well,
80% of the
that's right,
panels
because
disappeared.
people don't want to be in that kind of position.
Well, and they can't afford to be. So that caused huge supply chain disruptions. So what the Biden administration has said is, listen, we cannot rely on these external sources for such an important industry like solar, which is going to transform our country over the next several decades. So we need to make sure this is done here. And so what they're doing is saying, you know what, we're going to give you a 10% additional tax break if you use products that are manufactured here in America. And as a result, because of that investigation by the Commerce Department, because of the Inflation Reduction Act, all these companies are scrambling to install or to create
Manufacture.
manufacturing facilities here in the United States.
Well, and there's a whole chain of companies that are involved in that process,
Sure.
with parts and all kinds of things. But I just want to say that I feel like when I hear things like the drones being used to really kind of hold people to their feet to the fire, saying you've got to do a good job of, installing and then maintaining these panels, and then because they've never done that around fossil fuel, it could just spew out all over the place or leak, and they wouldn't care.
Yeah, but we're better.
Well, that's another
Solar's
program.
better.
But the other thing that I feel hopeful about is that I feel that with the the reduction
Inflation Reduction Act.
yes, that some of these things saying it has to be American made and all that, it speaks across the political lines because people want to see these things happen, and it also has the possibility of really giving solar an awful lot of credit for reinventing the middle class.
Yeah, let's hope. I mean, it really does. I mean, it could be as transformative as, say, the emergence of the automobile industry was for the Midwest.
Absolutely, and if
You
we
know,
just parcel it out a little and play it out a little bit, we know there are 700,000 jobs in the industry that,
Well, right. Yeah, we need to create
yeah,
700,000
right.
jobs over the next 7 or 8 years in
So
order
we
to
have,
meet these
yeah,
goals.
and those are going to be jobs that pay a living wage, and that living wage then filters down to communities where people can afford to buy a home, can afford to do things with their kids, and so I think I don't want to give too much credit. It's early days, but it has the potential to do amazing things. So go out there and get solar, or get trained if you want to be in the industry. It's
Well,
pioneering days.
yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of discussion saying that we will look back at this period of time and say there was the solar industry before the Inflation Reduction Act, and now there's the solar industry after. I
Mhm.
mean, this is a big deal. And we've talked about it at other shows. Well, let me get back to fire because we've
All right,
wandered
fire.
off for just a little bit. But essentially, one of the questions is how bad were these fires? There were these fires and
Yeah,
they,
how
they
bad could
happened.
they be? They're on top
How
of the
bad?
roof.
Well, about 28% of them only damaged the component that caught on fire.
Well, that's pretty
So,
cool.
so that's pretty minimal, right? A little inverter catches on fire and the inverter's damaged. Nothing else happens.
Mhm.
34%, another 34%, pretty much destroyed the PV installation, but caused no damage to the building.
Wow.
Okay, so more than half of these only damaged the PV system.
Yeah, if your furnace and the system attached to it catches on fire, your house is baboom.
Yeah, your house, the furnace is not your biggest problem at that point.
No.
Of these 32%, part of the building was damaged, probably the roof,
Yeah.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
And only 6% of them, the building was a total loss.
But you
So
don't know what kind of building or how big
yeah,
it was. Maybe it collapsed because of the weight of the
I don't
array
know.
or something.
I don't know. But really now you're saying, okay, there were 2.7 million installations. There were 210 fires caused by it. And out of those 210, only about half of them or 90 of them caused damage to the building.
Mhm.
So I think the takeaway from all of this is the risk from solar is really pretty minimal.
Uh-huh.
Certainly a lot less than a fireplace, a lot less than a gas stove, a lot less than a hot
Yeah.
water heater.
Yeah, gas
You know,
stove, that's a
I mean,
bad
we
one.
tend to overestimate certain risks and underestimate
Uh-huh.
a lot less than going through the drive-through at McDonald's, so, or shopping in the parking lot of Walmart. So don't worry too much about fire and solar. All right. Well, we've come to the end here. You've been listening to When the Biomass Hits the Wind Turbine with Jay and Annie Warmke. We want to thank our Emmy award-winning Never Catches on Fire producer, Adam Rich.
That's the truth.
That's right. It's hard to get him worked up about anything. All right. And we want to thank you for spending just a little bit of time with us. And as your grandmother hopefully told you, the secret to a happy and sustainable life is...
Listen to Jay. He loves PV.
All right. No, that's not what she said. What did she say, honey?
Oh, she said, play nice with others, clean up your own mess, and listen to Jay when he talks about solar.
Beautiful. All right. Till next time. Bye-bye.
You can find more information on living sustainably in our unsustainable world at bluerockstation.com.